Hey man, thanks for sending this through. Really excited to, continue to work on a lot of things that we're kind of picking up from where we were, and lots of good things to work on. I also really appreciate you putting in the notes sort of your perspective. I always love having my drivers self-analyze. Helps me get in your mind a little bit more. And I think your braking efficiency one, especially, is really, really spot on. A lot of my focal point, especially in the first half of the lap. Really interestingly, the first half of the lap you were struggling with one technique that you didn't have as much on the second half of the lap. So let's go ahead and start breaking into this. So um, as we approach turn one, obviously right now there's a long distance between when you come off the throttle to when you brake, right? You come off the throttle here and we coast, and then we start our brake application now. Sort of the first goal for me, or first goal that I'd like to give you is to reduce that distance. So I want you flat, 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 flat off transition to the brakes. The reason why is when you come off the brakes and start to coast, you shift a little bit of weight to the front. But then when you kind of have an extended coast period, when you go to the brakes, and I don't quite understand the physics of this one as much, but you don't transition as much weight to the front versus if you come straight off the throttle and transition straight to the brakes, which means you actually have a little bit less grip to brake. So there's always exceptions to the rules. There's some corners where I might want to really coast into it, but around Road America, it's flat, 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 off, then brake. So even if it means you brake a little bit earlier for right now, I want you to do that. Number two, and this is sort of the main thing that I want you to focus on, is I want you looking at two areas here. I want you looking at sort of this, brake pressure here, and then also the long G graph here, right? So the more that this goes up, the harder you're braking. And I just want you to look at the consistency on your pedal, especially here to turn one, right? So we ramp up to peak brake pressure, 1.2 Gs, right about here. Now watch what happens. You come off the brakes, almost completely off the brakes, and then you add more brake pressure. And then we come completely off the brakes, and then we add more brake pressure, right? And then we actually get up to our real peak brake pressure almost right at the turning point, right? Right about here is right where our peak brake pressure is coming, and you're not far from the turning point, right? So you transition a lot of weight right at the turning point. So your sort of brake pressure here is something that looks a little bit like this, and then you're off, and then you come back to it a little bit, and we off, a little bit more back to it, off, and then it boom like this, and then it drops off, right? So this is sort of our turn one brake pressure. Really, what I want to see in turn one is a brake zone that goes big ramp, hold, 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 and then a release like this. One brake pressure, right? And I think the reason why we're on and off brakes a lot is because you broke pretty early and you're like, oh shit, I'm over slowing, then we get off, and then there's a little too much, and then we get to it, and then I'm over slowing, then we get off. I think there's a little bit of that happening. That's why it's not happening as many other corners. But it's really important for us to not be on and off the pedal because it's affecting weight transfer and it's making it harder for you to sort of make the systematic changes, a lot more variables, right? Now imagine if you came in here and you say, I'm going to have one brake zone. Okay. And I'm going to get up to my peak brake pressure really early. So I'm going to brake, boom, here, peak brake pressure, brake, 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 brake. When you come off the brakes, you might be at 30 miles an hour here, right? You might be going really slow. But it's a lot easier to fix one variable, which is, well, shit, I broke too early. So last time I started braking here, now let me try to carry the full throttle until I get within a car length and a half of this access road. Do the same thing. It's still overslowed. Okay, let me see if I can get to the access road and then brake. One variable. Right now, your variables are, where did I lift off the throttle? Where did I brake? And then sort of how much did I kind of do in the middle part of the brake zone? There's like 3 or 4 variables that I couldn't figure out, let alone you trying to figure that out. So the number one goal that I want you doing here is in these brake zones with straight line braking, I want your peak brake pressure coming early, okay? So we're starting to kind of give you an idea, right? We're starting to ramp up to peak brake pressure, or ramping up, ramping up, ramping up. I should see your peak brake pressure coming like now. So it's sort of not instantaneous, but think about it like a squeeze. You squeeze to peak brake pressure, peak brake pressure, peak brake pressure, release, 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 release off. I don't care about lap times. I don't care about how slow you're going. Let's get that consistent, and let's get consistently off the throttle to the brakes, okay? Once we get those two things consistent, it's going to be a lot easier for you to systematically work our brake zone up, because ultimately, and I don't really want us to be focusing too much on late braking, but we need to get to a point where it's at least like a little bit more challenging. And I think ultimately we're probably 5, 6, 7 car lengths too early. Like we probably could get closer to this range down the road. I don't want to get there right now. I want to solve the consistency first. Let's get that right. Then we work our brake zone up to a somewhat challenging position, not super challenging, so that we can figure out corner entry speeds, corner exit, and then the final stage of what we'll work on together is braking deeper. But that'll be kind of down the road. But we need to get to a little bit more consistent on the spot. Okay, for right now, the next thing I want you focusing on, and this is going to be the last sort of big thing for this lesson, we're just going to kind of go through this in every other corner, is coming back to weight transfer. And this is going to be one of our most important fundamentals, is I don't want you getting to throttle before you're ready to unwind the steering wheel, right? So when you get to throttle, so imagine you've turned into the corner, the weight's on the front end. When you get to throttle, what happens? It shifts weight off the front end. Where the weight goes is where the grip goes, so you take away front grip. At this point of the corner, what are you asking the car to do? Turn, right? You're, come on, car, turn, 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 turn. So you're asking for front grip. Now notice, right here, what are you doing? You're applying the throttle, but you're still asking the car to turn, 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 turn. So your feet and then your hands and your body are miscommunicating. Your body, your hands, everything's asking the car to turn, but your feet are taking away the ability for the car to turn. So I need you to be patient. Wait. Right here, this is where we should be able to start unwinding the steering wheel. This is where your initial throttle application should come, right? You're getting the throttle way back in here because your ass is telling you, shit, I'm too slow. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel like an idiot. I'm going so slow here. We got to make sure we're not solving that with throttle, right? Because now we're sort of mismanaging weight transfer, and you're inducing understeering to the car, and you feel like you're at the limit, even though we're really not that close to the limit of the car. It's just you're managing weight transfer incorrectly. So for right now, just for this next time, you're going to go a little bit slower. Bear with me, but be really specific with not applying throttle until you're ready to unwind the steering wheel. Don't solve the overslowing problem with throttle coming too early. So the sort of major, take it a step back, the braking consistency, ramp up, hold, release as you come to the turning point, the time between off brakes to throttle, and then the timing of throttle, making sure it doesn't come before you're ready to unwind the steering wheel. Those are going to be the 3 major fundamentals that we're going to build off of, right? So turn 3, watch your brake trace again here, right? Brake, 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 almost release off. You didn't go fully off, but big release, big add, peak brake pressure coming almost right at the turning point again, which we want to get away from, and then release. So here, your brake zone looks like this, and almost down to 0, and then big spike, big brake pressure, and then release, where I want your turn 3 brake zone looking like sort of this again, right? So peak brake pressure needed to come early, almost where you're coming off the brakes is almost where I'm getting to peak brake pressure, okay? And then let's take a look at your throttle. Boom. See how it's coming still a little bit too early? Wait. Boom. Right here, this is where we should start to unwind the steering wheel. This is where throttle comes, and let the car be free out of there, okay? Going down to turn 5, we can kind of fast forward down the straightaway a little bit. So one small note that I want you to try is, I've heard a lot of reports from drivers after the repave that the crown of the road has gotten pretty bad for them here. And I've heard from a lot of drivers that the car feels better for them now out over here and braking along the outside of the road, where we used to always brake where you're braking here. If the car's not upset for you, then keep doing what you're doing. If the car does start to feel like you're getting upset, then try the outside here and see if it feels any better. But once again, let's take a look at your brake zone here, right? So looking at a brake pressure, right? We kind of slowly ramp up, kind of middle brakes pressure, off the brakes, slowly ramp up, off the brakes. Come back here, slowly ramp up, almost off the brakes. But then right before turning point, we add brake pressure and then off the brakes. Same note. I want us building consistency. The next thing here is look how long we're off the throttle before we brake, right? Off the throttle, we coast, and then we brake. Same note as turn 1. Even if you can almost stop the car before turn 5, brake hard, release, off, throttle, full throttle out of here, right? So even if you can almost stop the car, I want to make sure we're not on and off the brake so we can limit the variables. That's going to let you challenge the brake zone a little bit more. My goal for you next time is I think we can be getting down. I think your initial brake zone at the 500 board is a pretty good initial spot, but I think you could be full throttle to this point, right? Full throttle to just before the 500 board and then transition, but then make sure we're hard on the brakes, releasing, off. Now, the next thing is throttle, right? Your throttle here, it's close, just a hard length too early. Wait here. And the reason why you can't unwind the steering wheel right now is because of your early throttle, right? Your turning point's pretty solid. Your apex point's pretty solid. You should be able to start unwinding steering wheel, but you can't because your throttle induces that understeer, okay? So turn 6 for right now looks pretty solid. I'd rather focus on like 1, 3, and 5. I like your brake zone through there. Throttle is okay through there. Turn 7 for right now also looks pretty solid. Turning point looks good. Nice patience. Throttle here looks way better. Nice drive out of here. Turn 8, your brake zone's actually a lot better. We still have a little bit of that coast into the brake zone, right? Where I want to see you try to be flat to the 300 board and then brake. Much better job getting up to peak brake pressure early in turn 8. Way better. You come off the brakes at the turning point. That is great. Throttle is also pretty solid. Turn 8, I think, is one of your better corners. I just want to see you get back to full throttle between here and where we turn in for the carousel. So turn 8, really solid. If we can replicate what you're doing in turn 8 in the brake zone and throttle in turn 1 and turn 3 and turn 5, we'll have a massive improvement. So then we just need to be flat until you start to turn into the carousel, right? So full, transition off, patient, and then try to add throttle. We're going to work on some stuff in the carousel after this. I just want to really focus on our fundamentals, and then we can come back and have some areas to improve ultimately, okay? So coming into, I don't know what they call the chicane here when it's not the kink, but brake zone, pretty solid in here. I like this, right? My goal for you is talking about throttle. So for this next right-hander, notice how we get back to throttle and we're on maintenance throttle, we get back to full throttle. What I want to see us do here is think about weight transfer. So right here, when we get our hands straight, I want to see us try to get back to full throttle for just a quick burst. Maybe you're not quite back to full throttle, but when you get your hands straight in here, more aggressive to throttle so that as you turn into the next right-hander, you transition off the throttle, right? You want to turn. What do you want the weight to do? You want the weight going forward to get on the front tires to help the car turn. So more aggressive when your hands are straight. As you turn in, come off the throttle, wait, speed throttle, full throttle where you are, and that should help you roll a little bit more speed through the right hand, right? Because right now, if you tried to roll any more speed through here, by just having maintenance throttle, the car would be understeering so bad you would drive off the track or never get back to full throttle. So that weight transfer will help you get more speed through the right-hander and carry more speed down at the Canada corner, okay? I think your Canada corner actually also looks really solid to me. Coming in, a little bit of that coast and brake, but better here. Better job with where you work up to peak brake pressure. You do transition off the brakes a little bit here in Canada corner, right? Peak, you come off almost all the way, and then you add that brake pressure. So better ramp up with the initial brake pressure, just making sure that we're not coming off the brakes. You don't ever want to come off the brakes and add, right? The sort of golden rules in this sport is if we're talking about throttle, once you start to build throttle, you never want to have to release off of it and add to it, right? So once you start to add, it should be a nice slope back to full throttle. The brakes are the inverse of that, right? So once you start to release off of pressure, you never want to have to add brake pressure back to it, right? Once you start to release off of it, it should be a nice slope. Now, there's always exceptions to the rules, and there's always like, hey, you're getting a little bit too hot. Sometimes you got to add a little bit of brake pressure, like, yeah, conservation. But as a big picture, those are the two kind of golden rules that we're really looking for here, right? So in the brake zone in Canada corner, you see how you release off of it back in here, right? You're releasing off. You have to add to it. That's what we want to avoid. And then looking at throttle, because your throttle your throttle in Canada corner is pretty damn solid. That's exactly where I want to see it, right? And then you get right back to full throttle. You don't have that big release that you have elsewhere. And then for right now, Billy Mitchell and 14 look pretty damn solid. This looks good to me. Billy Mitchell, we had, turn 14, we had a little bit of traffic that caused you to probably break a little bit early. But for right now, this looks good to me. Just really patience the throttle in 14, right? Remember that golden rule of once you apply throttle, you never want to release off of it. So see how you're applying throttle? That's the release. Adding back, and we're just sitting here at maintenance throttle, maintenance throttle, maintenance throttle, maintenance throttle, maintenance throttle, and then we get back to full throttle. Again, 14, where does my initial throttle application come? Right about here, as my right front tire gets down this apex curve. This is where I'm getting the throttle for the first time, and then driving out of here. So you're gonna over slow, right? You're gonna come off the brakes, and you're gonna be like, oh my god, I'm so slow. Don't fix that with throttle. Just sit there and suffer in it, right? Oh, I'm so slow, but don't get the throttle, don't get the throttle, don't get the throttle. Here, get the throttle, go. You're going to go a little slower. Ignore that. We're going to fix that by challenging and working on our brake zone, right? Because ultimately, you're starting your brake application back in here, where theoretically you could probably get 3, 4, 5 car lengths later, and then we're going to be carrying in more entry speed with right weight transfer, and your ceiling of a driver is going to grow so much more versus just trying to get the throttle too early. Okay, hopefully that all makes sense. Let me know if you have any questions. Let's keep working on it, man, and can't wait to see your progress.